There comes a moment in life when everything that once seemed random begins to align with almost divine precision. People appear, connections deepen, and you feel, on a level that defies logic, that you've met someone who touches your soul in a way you can't explain. This feeling isn't chance, it's a calling, a profound reunion with what has long been dormant within you, the love your soul was always meant to recognize. It's as if the entire universe, in silence, conspires to bring you closer to something that transcends time and reason. When this experience happens, it doesn't just reveal the other, it reveals who you are at your core. And perhaps, just perhaps, God is showing you the way back to yourself through love. If you've ever felt something like this, comment below. My soul is ready to recognize true love. According to Jung, the meeting with the person who seems destined for our soul is not a simple romantic coincidence, but a profound psychic event. In analytical psychology, Jung proposed that within each of us exist unconscious archetypes that shape our choices and emotional experiences. One of the most important is the archetype of the anima, in men, and the animus, in women, internal representations of the feminine and masculine principles that we unconsciously seek to project onto others. When someone appears and awakens something deep within us, what we're often experiencing is in large part a projection of these archetypes. This projection isn't negative by itself, it's a powerful opportunity for self-knowledge. True love isn't only about the other person, but about what they awaken and reveal within us. Jung believed these encounters have an evolutionary purpose. They guide us toward individuation, the journey toward inner wholeness. The soul recognizes in the other fragments of itself that need reintegration. The shadow, what we reject or don't yet know about ourselves, also tends to be activated in these deep connections, challenging us to grow, to integrate, to love more authentically. The encounter with the soul's love is therefore a chance for transcendence, a living mirror through which we are called to unite light and shadow, reason and feeling, masculine and feminine. In this context, to say that God is showing you who your soul was always meant to love is also to recognize that this love is a sacred path of personal transformation, a return to the center of your own being through the other. From Jung's perspective, projection is one of the most powerful and most challenging mechanisms of the human psyche. When we project onto someone, we unconsciously transfer aspects of ourselves, desires, fears, virtues, or shadows onto them, as if they didn't belong to us. In the context of love, this intensifies. The soul, thirsty for completeness, recognizes in the other what hasn't yet been integrated within, and this recognition can be mistaken for destiny, for a cosmic connection, for true love. But at its core, it's a deep call to look inward. When someone enters our life and we instantly feel a connection that seems spiritual or otherworldly, it's often not that person themselves who causes it, but rather the projection of what we carry unconsciously, now taking shape before our eyes. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. That transformation begins precisely with the recognition of what's being projected. The soul, then, is not simply finding the other, it's finding itself through the other. This phenomenon is strongest when we're emotionally vulnerable, spiritually awakened, or going through moments of psychological transition. In such phases, the psyche opens to unconscious contents that demand expression, and often, the unconscious uses love as the vehicle to manifest them, because nothing penetrates human consciousness more deeply than love. So we project ideals, traits, unresolved emotional needs, archetypal images, all that remains hidden within, onto the person who comes to occupy that symbolic space. However, this doesn't invalidate the experience of love. Quite the opposite. It elevates it. What begins as projection can, through awareness and inner work, become a true soul bond. It's at that point that the relationship ceases to be merely a mirror of the unconscious and becomes fertile ground for integration and mutual growth. When we realize that what we see in the other is often a reflection of what lives within us, we begin to love with more truth, more presence, and less illusion. Jung also warned that we often confuse love with the longing for wholeness we feel when projecting our unconscious aspects onto another person. But real love only blooms when these projections are recognized, reclaimed, and integrated. That's why so many intense and seemingly destined relationships end painfully, because we can't bear the weight of what the other reflects in us. Yet for those willing to cross that mirror, what exists on the other side is a connection that transcends the ego and touches the essence of being. This process requires courage. We must be willing to see in the other not only the ideal, but also the reflection of our wounds, our traumas, our shadow. True love doesn't deny pain, it welcomes it as part of the healing process. When God or life places someone in our path who seems to touch our soul profoundly, it may be a call to look within, to recognize what in us still needs to be seen, loved, and reintegrated. Thus, projection ceases to be a mental illusion and becomes a sacred instrument of the soul, a portal of inner revelation. From a Jungian perspective, love isn't about finding someone who completes us, but about reuniting with the parts of ourselves that long to return to the center. The soul doesn't merely want the other, it wants to remember who it is through the other. In the end, to love truly is to recognize that what attracts us in another person is often what we still need to awaken within ourselves. And when that awakening happens, love transforms. From projection, it becomes a mirror. From mirror, it becomes a path. And from path, it leads us home, to our essence. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, few concepts are as deeply tied to the experience of love as the archetypes of anima and animus. Jung observed that within every human being lives a psychic image of the opposite sex, not merely as a biological idea, but as an archetypal structure reflecting inner aspects of the soul. For men, this archetype appears as the anima, the expression of the inner feminine principle. For women, it's the animus, the expression of the inner masculine principle. These archetypes don't just shape our fantasies and ideals about love, they also influence how we relate to others on a deep, symbolic level. When someone crosses our path and we feel an instant, inexplicable connection, it's possible that this person is activating the anima or animus within us. This activation triggers a powerful projection. We see in the other the enchanting reflection of something that hasn't yet awakened fully inside us. The other becomes a living mirror of our incompleteness, and the desire for union is not only physical or emotional, but existential. This impulse is, in truth, the soul's call to integrate its opposite principle and move toward wholeness. The encounter with the anima or animus, therefore, serves an essential function in the process of individuation. Jung saw this kind of love not as an end in itself, but as a force guiding us inward. The other awakens in us an image that already resided in the unconscious. That's why love often arises before truly knowing the person. It's because we love something we already recognize within, even before understanding who stands before us outwardly. This isn't romantic fantasy, it's a symbolic experience deeply rooted in the structure of the psyche. Yet this experience carries a paradox. While it brings us closer to ourselves, it can also distance us from the reality of the other. When we project our anima or animus intensely onto someone, we risk not seeing the real person, but rather the idealized image they represent for our soul. This can lead to disappointment, unrealistic expectations, and even separation. But if we remain conscious of this mechanism, the encounter can become a catalyst for a more mature and genuine kind of love. Jung emphasized that the goal of life is not merely to find the other, but to integrate what the other awakens within us. The true encounter with the anima or animus doesn't end with the person who embodies that archetype externally. It deepens when we begin to assimilate those qualities inwardly. The man who integrates his anima becomes more intuitive, sensitive, and receptive. The woman who integrates her animus becomes more rational, grounded, and assertive. This balance doesn't erase our differences. It expands our capacity to love with awareness. In this sense, love is an alchemical force. The other is the fire that activates the soul's transmutation. It's no wonder that intense relationships often destabilize us emotionally. They stir the foundations of the unconscious, bringing dormant parts to the surface. And though that may seem chaotic, it's precisely within that chaos that we find the seed of transformation. When we feel that God is showing us who our soul was always meant to love, we may actually be standing before a rare opportunity to see the image of the divine within ourselves reflected through another human being. This love isn't ordinary, nor is it free from challenges. It demands discernment, surrender, and above all, humility to recognize that the true purpose of the encounter isn't to complete the other, but to awaken wholeness within ourselves. The animus and anima call us toward the center of the soul, toward the reconciliation of opposites, the inner marriage between reason and feeling, action and contemplation. When we answer this call consciously, love ceases to be an external pursuit and becomes an inner journey. And then perhaps we are truly ready to love, not the projected image, but the real being, and to love ourselves too with that same intensity. In Jung's work, individuation is the process by which one becomes who they truly are, a psychic totality that goes beyond the persona, social masks, conventions, and external expectations. It's a deep, solitary, and at the same time, relational path. Because we don't become whole in isolation, the soul finds its truest mirrors in deep relationships, especially in those that touch our oldest wounds and deepest longings. To love someone truly, according to Jung, is not merely an emotional experience. It's a rite of passage towards self-knowledge. In relationships that awaken the unconscious, the soul is called to grow. The other ceases to be merely a companion and becomes a mirror, a symbol, an involuntary guide pointing to all that still needs to be seen, accepted, or integrated within us. Intense passions, recurring conflicts, cycles of closeness and distance all carry deeper meaning. They're symbolic expressions of the psyche's movement toward wholeness. To love, then, becomes an alchemical process in which each encounter transforms us. It's within this landscape that individuation finds fertile ground. Jung said, individuation is not isolation from the world, but the achievement of an inner position from which we can relate to the world authentically. Deep relationships push us out of autopilot. They force us to confront our defenses, insecurities, and unconscious complexes. They expose us to the pain of rejection, the fear of loss, the anger of frustration. But above all, they invite us to transcend duality, self and other, good and bad, control and surrender. Many believe that true love is free of conflict, but Jung saw the opposite. True encounters are those that disturb the ego, for they challenge its certainties. When someone touches us deeply, they inevitably awaken not only what's best in us, but also what's been repressed, denied, or forgotten. It's at this point that love becomes the path of individuation, not because the other completes us, but because they confront us. And in confronting us, they reveal us. Love doesn't make us whole, it shows us where we are not, and that's where inner work begins. Their conscious relationship doesn't avoid conflict. It seeks to understand it as a symbolic expression of a psychic tension needing integration. Every clash reveals a part of our unconscious crying out for recognition. Every pain exposes a wound to be healed, not by the other but by ourselves. In this sense, love doesn't save, it points the way to inner salvation. Jung also warned against emotional fusion, when two people mistake love for dependency, losing themselves in each other. Individuation requires maintaining psychic autonomy, even within the deepest bond. We must learn to be together without losing ourselves. To truly love, we must first find ourselves. And paradoxically, it is through love that we often begin that journey inward. The deep relationship, the one we feel guided by something greater, pulls us out of comfort and pushes us inward. It doesn't just awaken feelings, it awakens archetypes. The soul recognizes in the other not just a partner, but a key, a code, a mirror of itself. And in that recognition begins a journey far beyond romance, a psychic, spiritual crossing where each phase of the relationship, from the initial enchantment to the challenges of coexistence, represents a stage of individuation. To love, from this perspective, is not merely to surrender to another, but to surrender to one's inner destiny. It's accepting that relationships serve a higher purpose than immediate happiness. They reveal who we are, who we can become, and where we still need to grow. They deconstruct us to rebuild us. And in this cycle of symbolic death and rebirth, the soul finds its true form. Therefore, when a relationship feels divinely orchestrated, as if the soul were guided to that meeting, perhaps the real miracle lies not just in the love itself, but in the transformation it brings. Individuation in this context ceases to be a solitary path and becomes a profound dance between two unconscious minds seeking light. It's within this sacred symbolic space that love reveals its greatest gift, being the portal that leads us back to our center. There are moments in life when everything seems orchestrated by a higher intelligence, an unexpected meeting, an instant connection, a deep sense that this person was sent by something or someone beyond rational understanding. For Jung, such events weren't mere coincidences, but manifestations of what he called synchronicity, external events that align meaningfully with inner states, even without a causal link. When we feel that God is showing us who our soul was always meant to love, we are touching precisely this archetypal and spiritual dimension of existence. The soul has its own language and timing. It moves along paths the ego can't comprehend, guided not by logic but by symbol, mystery, and the deep need for integration. Love, in this sense, becomes one of the most powerful forces of spiritual transformation. It's not merely affection between two bodies, but a cosmic impulse driving us toward unity, healing, and inner reconciliation among all our fragmented parts. Jung saw God not as an external figure, but as an inner image, an archetype of the self, the regulating center of the psyche, the core guiding our individuation. When love strikes like lightning from above, it's as if this self were calling us. Love then ceases to be merely relational and becomes symbolic. It calls us to awaken, to grow, to remember what we've forgotten about ourselves. The other appears not only as a messenger of affection, but of destiny. Yet destiny isn't rigid or predetermined. Jung didn't believe in fatalism, but in purpose. What we call the right person may in truth be the one who most faithfully leads us to our center, sometimes through joy and union, sometimes through conflict and separation. In the end, what matters isn't the outcome of the relationship, but how much integration it allowed. Love and destiny then stop being external forces and become aspects of the same inner journey, the soul's reunion with itself. That integration requires the union of opposites, the inner masculine and feminine, the conscious and the unconscious, light and shadow. When love arrives, it carries the power to activate all these poles. The other, by touching our essence, also reveals our deepest wounds. Because true love isn't anesthesia, it's revelation. It shows where we're broken, where we've abandoned ourselves, where we must recover. And that recovery demands surrender, not to another person, but to the soul itself. That's why so many describe these encounters as spiritual experiences, because they truly are experiences of reconnection with the sacred. God, or the inner image of the divine, manifests in such moments as an organizing force of the psyche. The soul recognizes it is not alone, that an invisible thread connects everything: time, memory, desire, pain, transcendence. And on that thread, love inscribes itself not as a fleeting feeling, but as an eternal calling. When we understand love as a path to the soul's integration, our way of relating transforms completely. We stop seeking salvation in others and begin to see them as companions on the journey, a mirror where God, through the soul, whispers what still needs healing, expansion, and release. Destiny, then, isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about finding the one who provokes us to become whole. Jung reminds us that this integration doesn't happen automatically. It's deep, often painful psychological work, but absolutely necessary. Every meaningful relationship becomes a laboratory of the soul, inviting us to strip away illusions and touch what's real, inside and out. And it's in this radical honesty that the divine presence reveals itself most clearly, not as a miracle outside us, but as the living manifestation of the self within us. So when love finds us and feels greater than any explanation, perhaps it truly is God calling, not to lose ourselves in the other, but to finally recognize ourselves as whole. To understand that loving at this level isn't just a human act, it's a spiritual experience. A prayer lived through the skin, the soul, the gaze, and through it, the soul becomes what it was always meant to be: whole, conscious, and complete. To love in the light of Jungian psychology is far more than feeling affinity or sharing moments of intimacy. It's a profound calling to the transformation of the soul, a symbolic movement that leads us to meet who we truly are. When we feel that love has arrived as a sign from God, as a revelation of destiny, we are in truth being invited to begin the process of individuation. The other doesn't appear to complete us, but to awaken in us what still needs to be integrated. This kind of love requires courage, presence, and awareness. It takes us out of comfort, shows us our wounds and points us toward healing. The soul recognizes the love that belongs to it, not by desire, but by the expansion it brings. When God shows us who our soul was always meant to love, He is in fact guiding us inward, to the sacred that dwells within us. If this message touched you, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And now watch the video appearing on your screen. It may be the next step on your journey of self-discovery and true love.